Imagine being told you couldn't step outside your own home after sunset. That's exactly what my homeowners association tried to enforce with their illegal curfew. Before we begin, drop your country in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious how far this story will reach. It all started when I discovered a notice attached to my front door stating, "All residents must stay indoors after 8:30 p.m. Offenders will face penalties and possible enforcement action." No official signature, no government seal, just the HOA emblem printed in dark blue ink. Initially, I assumed it was some kind of joke. Who informs adults they cannot walk outside on their private property? But sure enough, the following day, everyone in the community was discussing it. Apparently, the new HOA president, Diane Crawford, had implemented it, claiming the restriction was for HOA security following several reported vehicle tampering incidents in the area. Diane wasn't your typical board member. She patrolled the streets like she owned them, clipboard in hand, pen clicking as she documented people's landscaping, fences, even the brightness of exterior lighting. And when she spoke, people complied. She possessed this unsettling combination of artificial calm and quiet dominance that made you question your own legal rights. I attempted to remain composed. My home was situated on the neighborhood perimeter. Quiet road, extended driveway, fenced backyard. I assumed the absurdity would pass, but Diane didn't appreciate being disregarded. 2 days later, she appeared in my driveway. No advance notice, no invitation, just positioned her small gray SUV diagonally across my entrance, obstructing the exit. "Mr. Evans," she stated, emerging with her clipboard, "I observed you were documented outside at 8:24 p.m. yesterday evening. That constitutes a breach of Community Regulation 7B. I chuckled. "You mean taking out my garbage?" Her mouth tightened. "The curfew exists for collective safety. If you cannot adhere, there will be repercussions." That's when I understood she wasn't joking. She had a plastic-coated citation prepared like an officer writing a ticket. "Ma'am, this is private land. I don't work for you, I don't report to you, and you certainly don't get to dictate when I can exist outside." She leaned closer, dropping her voice. "You will follow the HOA's regulations, Mr. Evans, or enforcement will visit." And with that, she departed. No yelling, no intimidation. Just those words. That night, I sat by my window observing the deserted street. The entire curfew concept should have been ridiculous, but something about her delivery stayed with me. Enforcement. What did that actually mean? Then I began noticing unusual occurrences. A vehicle parked near the intersection, headlights flashing randomly, and the noise of footsteps beyond my fence after dark. The next morning, a second warning materialized, slid under my door. Final notice: 8:30 p.m. infractions will activate immediate HOA enforcement measures. That's when I decided I wasn't retreating. If they wanted to impose their fraudulent curfew, they'd have to confront me directly, because nobody, not some aspiring HOA dictator, gets to command when I can exit my own residence. It was 8:52 p.m. The atmosphere was calm, the type of silence that amplifies every sound slightly too much. I walked out to retrieve a tool bag I'd forgotten in my vehicle, nothing more than a 45-second trip. The gravel shifted under my shoes, and the night air touched my skin. Then the motion sensors activated. 2 individuals stood at my driveway's edge. Dark shirts, bold white printing across the front reading HOA Patrol. Not security, not law enforcement, just 3 words they believed granted them authority. One of them announced, "Good evening, Mr. Evans. You realize it's beyond curfew, correct?" I stood straight, maintaining my voice steady. "You realize this is private property, correct?" He dismissed me and signaled to his companion, "Record this. He's breaching 7B again." That's when I retrieved my phone and began filming. "Smile for the recording. This will appear excellent when authorities witness you trespassing." The slimmer one advanced quickly, reaching for my device. "Stop that," he demanded. "No," I said flatly. "You're in sufficient difficulty."
Before I could react, the larger man pushed me forcefully, directly in the torso. I stumbled backward one step, my hand grasping my vehicle's edge for stability. The adrenaline rush struck immediately. "You just committed an error," I cautioned. He swung first, wide, clumsy, intended to intimidate me. I evaded beneath it, captured his arm, turned, and used his own momentum to slam him down firmly onto the gravel. The crunch under him resonated sharply in the tranquil night. The other charged from behind, attempting to seize me by the shoulder. I pivoted, caught his elbow, and drove it downward across my arm. He grunted, tried to recover, but I stepped forward, trapped his leg, and swept him flat on his back. He rose again, swinging erratically. I slipped past his strike, grabbed his collar, delivered one solid strike to the ribs, and dropped him with a measured shoulder throw that emptied his lungs completely. He cried out in pain. "Remain down," I commanded. "Don't force repetition." But the large one didn't comply. He fumbled at his belt, possibly for a device, possibly worse. I moved in rapidly, pinned him face down, one knee applied just enough to secure him. Controlled, trained, effective. "Come on, brother," he gasped. "We're just implementing HOA policy." "You're trespassing and assaulting a property owner," I retorted. "That isn't policy, that's criminal activity." From nearby homes, porch lights activated. A neighbor yelled, "I'm contacting the police." "Excellent. Let them arrive." Minutes later, sirens pierced the night. Red and blue illumination washed across the driveway as two patrol vehicles approached. "Hands visible," an officer ordered. I raised mine, stepping away from the two moaning men. "They assaulted me on my property," I said calmly. "Everything's on my device." The officers advanced, separating everyone. One glance at my arm paused at the sight of the Army insignia tattooed there. "You military?" he inquired. "Former Army," I replied simply. They selected the incorrect person to attack. The officer nodded, turning cold eyes toward the aggressors. "You two are finished. Stand up. You're under arrest for trespassing and assault." As the handcuffs clicked, Diane Crawford's voice carried faintly from down the street, alarmed, yelling something about misinterpretations. I didn't bother looking. I just watched the lights flash against my fence and considered this wasn't an association anymore. It was a regime with clipboards and muscle, and Diane had zero awareness what type of confrontation she just initiated. If this HOA story has got your attention, hit like and subscribe because the consequences become even more significant. The two self-declared HOA enforcers were restrained near a patrol car, battered, breathless, and suddenly not so confident. One officer approached, reviewing his notebook. "You stated they confronted you initially?" I nodded, replaying the footage on my phone. Every moment was preserved. The shove, the threats, the initial swing, and the neutralization. The officer leaned closer, watched silently, then exhaled slowly. "Well," he said, "appears they chose the wrong homeowner." While I provided my statement, another unit went to verify their authorization as legitimate association patrol. That's when reality emerged. They weren't licensed for protection work, had no vetting procedures, and were operating under Diane Crawford's personal directives. She'd established a so-called community watch division following the alleged curfew violations and informed them they possessed permission to detain residents if required. That falsehood collapsed rapidly. Diane herself came hurrying down the roadway in nightwear, shouting that everything was a confusion. The officers didn't accept it. They isolated her, checked her background, and found multiple grievances already submitted by other residents for harassment and intimidation. By midnight, everyone involved was transported to the station. The two HOA enforcers were charged with trespassing, assault, and unlawful detention. Diane faced criminal impersonation of protection personnel, incitement, and conspiracy to commit assault. An investigator pulled me aside before departing. "Mr. Evans," he said, "I reviewed your service record." "Army veteran," I responded. He smiled slightly. "Makes sense. Most civilians wouldn't have managed it that professionally." The subsequent days were turmoil. Local media outlets covered the story. HOA president arrested for fraudulent curfew patrol assault. Cameras filmed throughout the community. Journalists described it as a textbook case of authority overreach. The HOA board conducted an emergency session without Diane and voted unanimously to terminate the entire enforcement program. I filed legal actions myself shortly after: assault, trespassing, emotional harm, and defamation. Between my recording, the police documentation, and Diane's own written directives, the case was airtight. 3 weeks later, the charges were finalized. Diane Crawford was impacted most severely: $30,000 in civil penalties, a protective order from my property, and complete removal from her HOA position. The county classified her unsuitable for community leadership. The two fraudulent enforcers confronted assault and impersonation charges, each fined $8,000 and sentenced to 9 months probation plus compulsory community service under police oversight. The association was penalized substantially and legally prohibited from implementing curfews or patrol policies ever again. Standing in my yard that evening, the air finally felt normal once more: quiet, peaceful, liberated. They claimed the curfew was to protect us, but sometimes the genuine threat isn't beyond your door. It's the individuals pretending to safeguard it. But what about the other residents living in fear under this illegal curfew? The investigation revealed Diane had targeted multiple homeowners who questioned her authority. One family paid thousands in bogus fines rather than face confrontation. A single mother was threatened with property liens for minor violations. This pattern of intimidation extended throughout our community. If this story of standing up to illegal authority resonated with you, please support our channel by liking this video and subscribing to Winds of Thought for more authentic accounts that deserve attention.